This is meant to be a curated small group experience and provide a true forum for authentic conversation to advance all of our education and to make us all better philanthropists. We want to talk about issues that matter most, and honestly, I can't think about anything that's more on our minds at this moment than the refugees. At the Atlanta Jewish Foundation, we are experts in handling your charitable investments. We thank many of you in the room for trusting us with those, and we are here to help with the most pressing needs today and to also help people achieve their philanthropic legacies for now and for generations to come. So as I said, today's topic is the refugee crisis. And we are going to be hearing from some incredible organizations and individuals who are working directly with refugees who have come to Atlanta and are restarting their lives here. I wanted to take a moment. This topic's particularly hitting home for me today. I had the privilege of traveling to Israel last week with a leadership group, the TRIT leadership group, sponsored by the Federation. And we sat in a room in Yokneam, Megiddo, which is our sister region in Israel. And we sat across from Ukrainian refugees there. And I looked into the eyes of this mom and her 5-year-old daughter, who came here when the mom was also 38 weeks pregnant, and they landed in Israel to start their life anew. And I couldn't think of what courage that takes, right? To show up in a country that you don't even know. And all they kept saying is, we feel safe. Thank you for letting us feel safe. So I stared at this little girl the whole time we were there. I have a 5-year-old myself, and you can't shake looking them in the eyes and just thinking about what that takes to pick up from a country and how bad it must be there and be warmly welcomed and embraced in a new land and a new place. So I had to share that because it's obviously very much on my mind. Much more to be said and learned here. So today we're going to have a panelist conversation, and then we're going to follow that up by small table conversation so that you can make sure that all of your questions are answered. And our goal is you leave here more educated and probably with many, many more questions as well. It's a big topic, and we have all the right people today and moving forward to be able to help answer those questions for you. So our panelists today, we have Jewish Family and Career Services. Zane Blechner of the ORA manager is here. I'm sorry if I didn't say your last name right. New American Pathways, Paedia Mixon, she's the executive director, and Nancy Gaddy, development director. And the Afghan American Alliance, Hogai Nassery is the CEO. And I'm sorry if I didn't pronounce anybody's name wrong. Please accept my most sincere apologies. I did want to introduce our incredible moderator for today as well, Dr. Mary Helen O'Connor. She is the Deputy Director of the Prevention Research Center at GSU, which is funded by the CDC, and it's a project addressing health disparities in the Clarkston community. Her teaching and research in the field of migration studies, education, and rhetoric and composition explores refugee education, agency, and identity. For more than 2 decades, and I'm sure we could say so much more about her, Dr. O'Connor has been a volunteer and advocate for refugees and immigrants in the Clarkston, Georgia, and one of the largest resettlement communities in the US. She also resides there, and she presents and lectures extensively on migrant students, refugees, and immigrant issues and community advocacy. So first, I will invite Sherry Frank, who's going to get us kicked off through a Jewish lens, and then we'll be inviting the panelists and our incredible moderator up here to get this going. So thank you all for being here.
No problem, no problem.
Hi, can you hear me? Should I put it down? Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so proud to be here, and particularly representing the National Council of Jewish Women. So first, let me tell you, in the early 1900s, NCJW established an agency at Ellis Island to support aid to immigrant families. Through the decade, we have been centrally involved in service to new Americans. And I finally remember Henry Burnbury, of blessed memory, spoke about landing at Ellis Island and being brought right to Birmingham to be resettled by the National Council of Jewish Women. So many folks have that direct experience. NCJW stands strong on immigration policy, and we have a lot of work to do in that area. We support humane and equitable immigration and naturalization, laws that help people get legal status, are able to work, get family support. I mention those things because we're seeing how challenging those issues are today. I was asked to speak about a Jewish perspective on this issue. The Torah teaches, and I quote, "Welcome the stranger, for you were once strangers in the land of Egypt." This phrase is repeated 36 times in the Torah, one of the most frequently expressed statements. It requires not only emotional support for refugees, but also the welcoming of refugees into a moral world. It's personal. Many Jews remember their own experience or experiences of their families as refugees from war, from replacement, from religious bias. We retain the memory of these and are mindful as we work and move forward. Just a few facts and figures. In 2020, the immigration allowed into the United States was 18,000. That is chillingly the same number allowed in 1938. Before that, immigration was generally in America 95,000, so it was cut by 75%. Just as we now begin to try to increase the numbers, agencies that had to live with the 18,000 cut staff, closed offices, and now all of a sudden it's the challenge of kind of gearing up to respond to this critical need. In Georgia, we have a lot of work to do legally too, in working with the Tahirih Justice Center, which is one of the agencies that deals with immigrants that are subject of domestic violence. When the new immigrants go through the courts in Georgia, 97% are denied. We're one of the highest rate in the United States of courts denying people the status to move forward with legal immigration. So we're dealing with political issues and social service issues. Years ago, the National Council of Jewish Women used to have forums, interfaith forums, and they would have Christians, Jews, and Muslims speak about certain issues. And it could be life issues and end-of-life issues and baby naming issues and a variety of religious issues, how we read text. But one time, the issue was, it was 2006, and the issue was immigration and welcoming the stranger. And I guess I was knee deep in Soviet Jewry immigration, and the Spirit moved me to write something. So I want to share with you how I began that session, titled "The Stranger." Who is the stranger in our midst? Surely it's someone God has kissed. Aren't each of us born with a spark of divine, yet some of us haven't had our little light shine? Is the stranger near or far away? Is it a frail elderly bent with the winter's day? Are they abused or homeless, cast aside, removed of the dignity and all of their pride? Are they suffering masses we cannot see, yet the media tells us about their tragedy? Are they victims of drugs, gangs, or war? Are immigrants living behind a closed door? While we may do all that we should, I believe each of us deep inside is good. We find courage and wisdom when we open the pages and turn back to the guidance of our tradition's sages. We're called, each one in a unique way, to embrace different faiths and do all that we may. Honoring, respecting, caring, and seeing, acknowledging the stranger is a human being. Who is this stranger in our midst? Surely it's someone God has kissed. Aren't each of us born with a spark of divine? Yet some of us haven't had our little line shine. To me, that's what immigration's all about, getting that line to shine.
Thank you, Sherry, very much. Now we'll call our panelists up and our moderator, and we'll go ahead and kick off that portion of the program.
That was an amazing introduction. I don't feel like I deserve it. I think that most of the people think they're deserving more of an introduction than I do because they've been working for forever and ever, professionally and personally in the refugee community. And so I think probably it'd be a great idea for us to start by everybody introducing themselves and telling us about your organization and your mission and what your organization does for the refugee community.
I'm Gaddy, and I'm going to defer to Paedia, who's the CEO of New American Pathways, and she can talk more at length about who we are. Okay, well, I'm Paedia. I'm CEO of New American Pathways. And New American Pathways is an immigrant and refugee service organization. Our mission is to help refugees in Georgia thrive. We are one of the 4 refugee development agencies in Georgia. Our model is to provide a holistic continuum of services that follow refugees and other immigrants who came here for humanitarian reasons on their pathway from arrival through citizenship and beyond. We do focus on some key milestones along that pathway. All of our services either focus on helping people achieve safety and stability, self-sufficiency, helping people find success in a variety of different ways, and also helping people be of service to the community that welcome them through volunteerism, voter engagement for new citizens, leadership development, and civic engagement.
My name is Zane Blechner. I work with Family and Career Services and some with the American Pathways, but that's complicated. But at JFNCS, we have all kinds of different program areas, but what we were able to do specifically for this refugee crisis, and more specifically for Ukraine, was we were able to raise private dollars in order to be responsive immediately when things started to fall apart back in March and April. And we're able to get a program up and running with private dollars while the government was still formulating a response for what was going on in Ukraine. And that's been, it's been challenging, but successful. And we've been successful in keeping people stable while we are all trying to figure out what the response to such a situation is.
My name is Hogai Nassery, and I am a lifelong Georgian, but I came here when I was 5 from Afghanistan. So I'm an Afghan American, and I'm a family physician. And about this time last year, as Afghanistan was unraveling, we formed our organization called the Afghan American Alliance of Georgia. And our 3 goals at that time were pretty consistent with what we focused on now. And one was to help fill in any gaps that exist because of the sheer number of Afghans coming and what the resettlement agencies might need from us in terms of, providing services if we can, providing a sense of community for Afghans coming in so that they know they're not alone here, that there are Afghan Americans, Afghans, and Americans who all care about how they're doing. And then thirdly, we thought we would be a way of just routing folks to be able to volunteer within the resettlement communities. And what we realized was there was so much work to do that we actually became 501c3 and started operating independently and helping in ways that maybe were not within the scope of the resettlement agencies or just an additional to. We're completely volunteer run. We have no employees. We are reaching a point where we do need to hire at least one person to help us keep things going, because we're reaching a more difficult stage. The initial stage, as hard and as acute as it seems, is actually pretty straightforward. You get a bed, take a bed to a family, you help them sign up for certain benefits. Now we're running into issues. And even before this, more like mental health issues, trauma issues, education challenges, getting folks back into college that were in college there, or helping them get English language skills, navigating our broken healthcare system here. So we're adapting to issues as they change. We work very closely with Paedia and Nancy, and I look forward to us working closely together too, and then also with the National Council of Jewish Women, who've been very generous with us, and it's been an amazing journey.
So I guess it's probably worth reflecting a little bit on the first question that I was asked, which is what is the global migration crisis? I think right now I'll put on my academic hat. I taught yesterday, so I switch quickly into like I'm teaching my class voice. But 1 in 8 people on the planet are forcibly enslaved. So there are very many different words that are used to describe displaced people. And many of them are political designations, others are ways that we describe people, but generally it's anyone who is unable to live safely in their own country. So the World Health Organization recently issued a very lengthy report on the growing concern that among climate change, the migration crisis is probably among the top issues facing our world. So if 1 in 8 people in the entire world have no safe place to live, then we bring that back to the local context, which is here in Georgia. And the person who can give us a really excellent history of Georgia's participation in refugee resettlement is Paedia, because she's been doing it so long. So I wanted to see if I could ask her to talk a little bit about the history of refugee resettlement in Georgia, because what most people don't know is that fewer than 1% of the people in the world who are forcibly enslaved ever get to go to a country and be resettled. So the people who we get to welcome and work with are like either winning the lottery, getting struck by lightning, or bitten by a shark, is what I tell my kids in my class. So the odds that you actually end up here and get to work with Hogai or with Zane or with Paedia or Nancy are slim to none. So the people that we welcome are extremely special, and Georgia's been doing it for a long time. So I want Paedia to tell us kind of history of how Georgia's been active in that space.
Paedia, can you use my sure.
Is it on? Okay, yeah, there we go. Oh my God. Okay, I just thought I was naturally loud, but okay. Yeah, so I think that there's probably been refugee resettlement unofficially in Georgia for a very long time. But the Refugee Act was signed by the only president from Georgia, Jimmy Carter, in 1980. And after that, many of the refugee resettlement agencies in some form or fashion that exist today started in Georgia. So over 40 years, we've been welcoming refugees to Georgia. In the beginning, we were most of the refugees we served were sort of Cold War refugees. We're talking about people from Cuba, from the former Soviet Union, from Vietnam. And then in the 1990s, the program really broadened. So we started seeing people from Somalia. We started seeing Kurdish refugees coming in. Obviously, there was the crisis in the Balkans, Rwanda, a really broad program. We've had our ups and downs in Georgia. We did face around 2011, 2012, the governor of Georgia at the time wanted to end the program in the state. And that is when we created an advocacy coalition and started thinking about policy a lot differently, which I think, looking back on that, we should have from the very beginning, because it's an important part of what we do. Today, just like, you all heard earlier that the program in Georgia shrank a lot and now it's growing very fast. So for years and years and years, kind of on average, Georgia resettled somewhere between 2,500 and 3,500 refugees. That was a very typical year. We at one time had 6 refugee resettlement agencies. Now we have 4. We did lose World Relief, which was a very large agency during the Trump years when we had cuts to the refugee program. During those years, we had, about 500. So we went from between 2,500 and 3,500 down to 500 or less as a state. And now this year we're back up at 2,500. So that's wonderful. Most of those individuals came in the first 3 months of the year. When we weren't quite ready for them. So the challenge for the 4 agencies, if you've been a volunteer or working with any of the 4 of us, bless you and thank you for your patience because we've been building back up. Clarkston has been a community of tradition for resettlement. It's a walkable community. There's a lot of resources there. There's a lot of relatively affordable housing in Clarkston. And so it's become the place where a lot of people get their start, although refugees are resettled throughout Metro Atlanta and also in Savannah. So that's down and dirty my history of refugee resettlement in Georgia. I will say when you talk to the administration at Clarkston High School, they'll tell you that the number of languages spoken at the school, every time I hear it, I'm always like, wow, is over 100. So it's very, very diverse. It's the place where I think a lot of us spend most of our time and it's been called the most diverse square mile in America. So we have a really interesting program. Georgia is right now the 11th largest resettlement site in the country. We were in the top 10 up until a few years ago. And I think we might get back to the top 10 within the next year or 2. So.
Just so you know, for the job that I do, Clarkston is where the majority of refugees are resettled when they come to Georgia. And there is a report on your table that was assembled by the organization that I lead. We had a summit. We have a summit in the community. And if you're interested in understanding the needs, the disparities, everybody here, but like Hogai was on a panel, Paedia's crew was there, everyone was there to talk about, we allow the community to let us know what their priorities are, because we feel like that's the most important way to understand the people that we're serving. So now that we've had a little history, I'd like to talk a little bit now about the really kind of active extreme pressures that have been facing the system, because I would say from my perspective, we went from reversed in the Trump years to 11th gear, and it has been exhausting during a pandemic. And I think that Hogai and Zane can update us on the Afghan situation, because that's actually an unprecedented situation. Politically, people do not understand that Afghans did not come here through the typical refugee system. And then Zane, you can tell us what we're looking forward to with the incoming Ukrainians. So Hogai, you want to take it on?
Sure. Is this working okay? Great. So when before Afghanistan fell, there was already a long queue of Afghans who were waiting to come into the United States through a process called the Special Immigrant Visa process. That was a process that was designed specifically for Afghans and Iraqis who were helping the U.S. military and U.S. operations in those countries. Folks did not want to take those jobs because they felt like, I will be targeted once you're gone. And so the understanding was, if you work with this for this period of time, you will be put into a track to where you can come to the United States and be given this visa and be on a road towards a green card. What happened during the Trump administration was that office was essentially dismantled. So a lot of people were just stuck waiting 4 or 5 years that were supposed to have been brought in. And a lot of veterans groups were very upset about this and were lobbying hard. So when Afghanistan fell, you had a lot of folks that should have been out of there already that were not. And then you had a lot of people who, not thinking that this was going to happen, and had been working with the Afghan military or had been working with subcontractors, felt that they were threatened and in a very vulnerable position because they had been receiving threats already. So Afghanistan didn't fall. It looks like it all fell at once, but it didn't. Provinces were dropping over time, and people had already left those provinces and gone to Kabul because they were being threatened. So those were some of the scenes you saw at the airport where everyone kind of was trying to get out at the last minute. And thankfully, Congress passed a bill that said we are going to grant humanitarian parolee status to these folks, basically saying we believe them when they say they are in danger, but they need to come here and be able to go through the refugee asylum process, which, as we heard earlier, is a process that is fraught with for a long time, I did asylum exams for victims of torture as a family doctor, and for GAIN and other organizations, and I was always told that the approval rate once you get into the court system is very low, even if you can show that their lives are in danger when they get back. So you have a lot of the Afghans that are here now are called HPs, or humanitarian parolees. These are folks that normally would have been stuck in a refugee camp for years as their paperwork and things were processed, right? So they're here now, and they are on a very, very short timeline before they could possibly be deported. Initially, it was 1 year. And now they did an extension to where it's essentially 2 years, but the process has started where they're having to go get biometric screening done, get interviews done, and we have a severe shortage of attorneys, immigration, everyone's doing the best they can to make this work. But all of this is the crisis we're hitting now. So this whole thing, since last year, it's been basically one crisis after another, after another, after another, and you keep hoping for legislation or funding or something that will help sort of mitigate the situation. At the same time, right now, we've still got Afghan families coming through the regular process, coming from where they've been in Qatar or other countries. And so they are arriving and needing the kind of support that you need when you set somebody up in a new apartment, you get them signed up for benefits, all of that. So it's like one crisis on top of another, or one need on top of this other one that's been brewing for a while. And so, if you talk to somebody like Justin Howell with the IRC, the two words he always uses are, this is historic and unprecedented. Historic and unprecedented. And the response from the community has been wonderful, but it has not been necessarily as strong as it has been for, say, the Ukrainians coming in or other groups.
That's on top of the normal. So as came while the refugee resettlement program began to be revised.
Yeah.
This is on top of the numbers of others that are coming through the regular process, which is about how much?
So I think we're going to hit our often adjusted target that we set at the beginning of the year, which is now at 600 by the end of this month. And to give you guys just a indication of what our lives have been like, in 2021, from the first 3 quarters of the fiscal year, we had resettled 33 people. In 2022, in the first 3 quarters of the fiscal year, we resettled 433 people. We didn't, in the first quarter of the year, we didn't know they were coming. So we've had to staff up in a pandemic with a staffing crisis that's happening, and sort of build the, it's a cliche, but build the plane while flying it. I've never heard a cliche that fit more what we were doing this year. And we have had, a ton of support from the community. I love sitting here with Dr. Nassery and Zane, because I see them all the time because we're partners, and they have been so wonderful and helpful in both of these kinds of unprecedented crisis situations, because Zane's going to tell you about Ukraine in a minute. But at the same time, the travel ban ended. So Somalis and Syrians that weren't allowed to come for years, they're coming. We also have a lot of people from the Democratic Republic of the Congo coming. We have people from Myanmar coming. There is a genocide in Myanmar against Rohingya refugees right now. And so a lot of people are survivors of genocide, and they are coming. So it's been a really challenging year. I think we've done our very best to rise to the challenge. And we're thrilled that the people are here, because that's what we've been waiting for. But, you know, stress is, you know, it doesn't seem like the right word anymore for what this year's been like. It's been hopefully once in a lifetime.
Well, I don't know, because there's gonna be another lifetime. Zane's getting ready to tell us about the next wave that's coming. And this is that we don't even know about. People call and ask me about Ukrainians all the time. And I actually asked him to please tell me what's going on.
Okay, well, first of all, Ukrainians are here, okay? This is not past tense. And when we decided that we wanted to get involved in this, we being JFNCS, we decided on day one, okay, this is something that we want to do. We need to find money for it. But I went to one of Paedia's colleagues and said, do you guys have Ukrainians? And she said that we actually had somebody come into one of our walk-in days on Friday. So we called that lady. Her name was Elena, and she said that she had 10 extra people staying inside of her house that had entered the United States from the Ukraine, and they had humanitarian parole stamps in their passport. So from day one, we were already at 10 clients. So I was able to find some immediate funding. We approached the Atlanta Jewish Federation, and it took some time because things take time, but we were able to secure about $200,000 in funding to expand the program. But during all of this, we were learning that this is an incredibly expensive process, because when they get here, we need to get them to a lawyer and they need to apply for a work authorization card. The turnaround time on a work authorization card is 10 months. So that meant that for every single one of these clients, we needed to come up with 10 months worth of living expenses in a time when rent has doubled. And so the amount of money that we have to raise per household is in between $20,000 and $40,000. So this has been incredibly expensive, and this has not been one of those programs where we could raise kind of a little bit of amount of money and then have huge outcomes and do a lot. So we were able to do for 56 clients, and still today, I think up to the next $30,000 to $40,000 that we would raise, I still need to keep in one bucket for emergencies in case people's work visas don't come, or in case somebody's unable to work for whatever reason, disability, whatever, because there's so much of the unknown around the Ukraine, around this Ukrainian project.
Do you want to talk briefly about the difference between the Ukraine humanitarian role and Afghan or we can? There's a difference. I can.
Sure, yeah.
So what's been interesting is, I told you, in Georgia, 40+ years we've been resettling refugees. There's a system. You know, there's a system where you apply overseas, you go through an 18-month screening 18 to 24-month screening process. Once you're approved, you come through a resettlement agency, there's funding for housing, you're on track to get your green card. It's a very, you know, rinse and repeat regular process. With Afghans, they were granted a certain type of parole, initially for 1 year, now for 2 years. And it made them eligible for resettlement. So resettlement agencies could provide resettlement services, but they're not on track to get a green card and citizenship, so they have to apply for asylum. But we could provide money for housing, food, clothing. You know, we could provide our typical array of services the way that we normally did with this added immigration piece. When Ukrainians came in, they were given a kind of parole and they were not approved for resettlement. So that is instead, the administration is going through a private sponsorship program. But lots of people arrived before the sponsorship program got off the ground. So some people are coming, most of the individuals and families that Zane has been serving with no sponsor. And so JFNCS, no, not officially, has become the default sponsor for these families. And then lots of the other families have private sponsors, and those private sponsors are supposed to pay all of their expenses. But you know, we are talking to sponsors who said, wait, 9 months, you know, that's not what I was thinking. Or a lot of the sponsors are families. So they just have, like the woman that Zane talked about, they just have folks, you know, couch surfing. And I think they thought resettlement, that's 3 months, and then they'll be able to get a job. And it doesn't really work like that. So now I believe, you know, the administration is trying to create new programs to address some of these issues, but it's sort of slow going, ever changing. We're just trying to figure it out. And so this is why Zane said, I have this unusual relationship. I'm at, you know, he's at our office so much. He basically works there because we can provide lots of case management. We know the benefits, we know the systems because we do this over and over again, but they're providing a lot of the financial assistance and a lot of that welcoming support for families. And as the program grows and changes, we're working together to figure out how do we do this? You know, basing some of our experience from Afghanistan, but it's not the same.
Why the initial policy for the Ukrainian slaves was different, why they were not given the same status as the Afghans? The idea of not being eligible for resettlement.
So honestly, it was literally a congressional choice. So there was an allocation. There was like a big Ukrainian allocation bill that recently happened. And although they approved lots of Office of Refugee Resettlement benefits for Ukrainians, things like medical, like Medicaid for Ukrainians. So like they are eligible for Medicaid. But for some reason didn't approve resettlement, but they did for Afghanistan. Why? I wish I could say there's a clear reason. Yeah.
All is very political. In fact, the Afghan Adjustment Act, which has been proposed over and over again, has been stalled or stopped because they wanted funding for Ukraine. So it's been a political football. It's back and forth between different parties and different people in power. It's very political. And I think it's also worth mentioning that what Paedia said earlier, the Trump administration disassembled almost every aspect, including the courts. So when you talk about not just what Paedia's group and Zane and Hogai's groups are doing, when we talk about the court system, everything is backed up. I'm leaving here right after this to go to USCIS and pick up one of my girls who just had one of her interviews. But it is going to take months and months, and we're a year into this already. And I mean, they're here. They only have another year before they have no pathway. Afghans have no pathway. It's still unclear what is going to happen with the Ukrainian. So this is very much a political issue. I mean, I know we're here to talk about funding and supporting families, but it is also very political.
Yeah.
And so we have gone from a system that has never changed since Jimmy Carter, 1980 signed the Refugee Act. The allocation, financial allocation for resettling a family has not changed. Since 1980, I think the amount of money that you get allocated. So these people are miracle workers. Like they have to go out and raise all the money. If you think about what the difference in the cost of living from 1980 versus 2022, and I don't even want to talk about inflation right now.
I will say, I'm gonna just update you. No, it changed significantly. And I think if you accounted for inflation, it probably wouldn't change very much, but it changes significantly when during the Obama administration, when we had a lot of Iraqi SIVs, because Iraqis were very good at self-advocacy and explaining and, advocating for themselves and other refugees. It did change. And now we do get we get an annual I think we get $25 a person more every year. So it has changed.
Yeah, well, Justin says it's not like if you adjust.
If you adjust for inflation, I don't
it's the
think
same
it would,
amount.
it would have
So, you know,
changed.
Some
no.
agencies are not getting the money they need.
And-
Barely, it's kind of ridiculous to think that, and I thought that the introduction that Sherry gave was great. I always think about my students, most of whom I've been teaching in Clarkston for 20 years. If someone sent me to South Sudan and said, get off the plane, learn the language, get a job, teach your kids, find a school, figure out where to find clean clothes and water and food, I would die. I couldn't do it. And we ask families and we bring families here and the system is built to expect that families are self-sufficient within 6 months, 3 months, 6 months. It's not reasonable. It's not rational. But what I will tell you is they do it. And they do an incredible job. And all of the data around refugee and immigrant resettlement in the United States is that there is not a zero-sum game here. They are an attribution. They are a contribution to our economy. There's a great new book that just came out called Streets of Gold that has all of the data. So if anybody wants to look up, you know, how much do refugees and immigrants cost our economy? They don't. They enrich our economy and our workforce. They make the United States a more diverse, successful, economically prosperous place to be. So they are an investment in our community. And so I'm used to speaking to groups of people who question that particular piece of it. But what I would say about the people that are sitting here is that they are miracle workers because they get very little and they have an incredible expectation that I don't think I personally could do. So I always like to bring some of my refugee students and friends with me to tell their stories because they're amazing. So if you want to come out to Clarkston and hear some of them, we'd love for you to meet them. But I wanted to see, so what are the biggest ways that you all think people can help your organization right now?
You guys want to go first?
Sure. This is where I'll pass the microphone.
There are a lot of ways, and I wanted to kind of give a shout out to a number of people that are here already. When the news first broke a year ago about Afghanistan, we were inundated with calls, and we really weren't sure what was going to happen first because nobody was here. But National Council of Jewish Women stepped up to the plate. They put together welcome baskets that are the greatest things I've ever seen. We gave away, I think, over 200 welcome baskets that included everything from culturally appropriate food to English dictionaries in different languages, maps of Atlanta, all kinds of stuff. And it wasn't just National Council. I think the Temple Emmanuel, Temple Sinai, all stepped up to the plate to do that. And those kinds of things we still need. It doesn't matter where folks are coming from. We always need things like supplies to give to people. We are part of a coalition called the Welcome Co-op. It's the 4 refugee resettlement agencies in Atlanta, and they handle all of the sort of setup of housing setups, apartment setups for anybody that's coming, whether they're from Myanmar or Venezuela or whatever. And if you are looking to put together a donation drive or set up an apartment, they have on their website, and you can go to our website too. They are always looking for donations of furniture, donations of household goods, and all of that's funneled through the Welcome Co-op. But not just New American Pathways, it's Hogai's organization and all the resettlement agencies. We have needs throughout the year for things like household goods. When all of the folks came from Afghanistan, there was a big call for rice cookers and pressure cookers. And another thing is, I don't know exactly the number, but when the Afghan families started arriving, Paedia and I went to deliver some of the welcome baskets, and we discovered that in almost every home that we went to, there was somebody pregnant.
Okay,
And then
I speak to that for just a second.
Yeah.
My thing is on you. So what happened was, this really kills me. I'm a very big proponent for family planning. A lot of these women got stuck on these army bases for months. Their depot wore off. They had controlled some of them that are from rural areas, they just have huge families. But if we gather demographic data on our families, and if you look at it, they'll have a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 5-year-old. Now they've got a 6-month-old. So this whole thing, nobody's at fault here that I'm saying, but the number of pregnant women and the number of women who call us and say, after their babies are delivered, can you please help me get an IUD? Can you please help me get on birth control? I cannot have another child. I mean, we're trying to get one woman into Grady right now. But to me, this has been a huge issue, just such a terrible unintended consequence of this upheaval. But thank you for bringing that up. The
Yeah, no,
families are huge.
and thank you. So actually, I was at lunch with Sherry and Adele to thank them for the welcome baskets. And somehow I mentioned this and they said, oh my God, babies, we do babies really well. And they put together the greatest thing that the greatest program we've ever done at New American Pathways. And it involved your group and CDC. We hosted a baby shower. I think collectively there was over 100 women that we got supplies for, 61 women, either women who had just had babies in their arms or were out to here. Showed up at the baby shower. We also combined it with the program we're doing with Georgia State. We did neonatal care and postnatal care, a presentation. We had over 200 other kids there on the floor crawling around. We spent $750 on toys. So we had kids playing everywhere. And then they also did, because another issue that we have is just getting people to understand the importance of COVID vaccines and education information around COVID. And they put together a whole information program about the importance of COVID vaccines. So it was a win-win for all of us, but I'm getting off the subject. We have, people are here and people keep coming. And as people go through our pathway, we have early childhood programs, we have after school programs, et cetera, et cetera. So we are always in need of school supplies, book bags, hygiene supplies. I think we are going to continue to have an ongoing need for baby items. So how people can help is, one, by just going onto our website, and checking out our wish list. We always have needs for people to do donation drives. We are always looking for faith-based and community groups to be part of our family friend program or welcome team program. And those are groups of people, small groups. Typically, the Temple was a group. Temple Sinai has been a group. Bet Havarim has been a group. They've for lack of a better word, adopted a newly arriving family this year from Afghanistan. It's for a 6-month period of time to just help orient people, get them on the MARTA, take them around town, and help with intensive English language tutoring, as well as tutoring kids in after school. We are always not just groups, individuals. We have a very big program called English at Home, because as Dr. O'Connor said, people come here and their English isn't great. With the Afghanis, a lot of them had better English skills than a lot because they had worked with US military. But people come in and you can go to an ESL class at Georgia State or Georgia Perimeter College, but a lot of people have to go to work right away or they have kids at home, so they can't take advantage of the class. So we have a program called English at Home, where we match volunteers with families or individuals, and that's a huge need. We have needs for volunteers in our after school program. We do a very big we call it end of year cheer. It's holiday gifts for it's everybody from newly arriving families to kids in our after school program. You can go onto our website. We're about to update the wish list, but we rely on groups to do that. There's always a need for donation of funds. I mean, we have a big need for volunteers. We have a big need for staff. But when the Afghan crisis happened, and it happened right after our budgeting period, we hadn't budgeted for all of this. We realized, like Zane said, we were going to be looking at north of about $10,000 per family unit of 4 to cover their costs over a 3 to 4 month period. And we implemented a special fundraising campaign. We are very grateful to say we raised over $500,000 in about 4 months. A lot of people in the Jewish community really stepped up to the plate, and those funds are being distributed. But with the Ukrainian program in particular, because none of this is being funded by the federal government, everybody doing this is on their own. And although we are not resettling folks, we are going to be providing services and case management. So there's always needs. Jewish Family Service has needs. Hogai's group has needs. Everybody has needs for funds. Anything else I've forgotten? You're looking pained. Did I leave anything?
Is she gonna say that we need donation? No,
We always need donation.
with Afghanistan, I want to say like housing is a big issue. So she did an incredible job. We did incredible fundraising for Afghanistan. If we want to take Afghanistan as a case study, we just got our end of third quarter financial reports, and we have spent $643,000 in private funds on emergency rent for Afghans. So just thinking about that and projecting forward for Ukraine, that's going to be a very big need.
Huge. So mine's kind of 3 tiers, okay? When we embarked on this, we chose a certain standard, and that was to replicate what the refugee resettlement agencies are doing. That means putting a family in their own private accommodation, no basements, no spare bedrooms, okay? Anything that can fit in an Amazon box can be new, okay? Sometimes furniture, we have to go, but we picked a standard that dignifies the client, and I really want to stick to that, and we've done incredible in that in Atlanta. So the first thing that we would need to make sure that we secure the funding for is for emergencies for the initial 56 people that we took on. I know that we have one family that's staying in one house, and they're a group of 43 additional people who are not sponsored. So there is still additional need to assist people who arrived in Atlanta who are not sponsored. It's going to be expensive. We can do it in a nice way though, and we can raise those funds. The third group that I am worried about, as Paedia mentioned, is nobody knew what the commitment was going to be if they took on financial responsibility and brought somebody through either a welcoming circle or a Unite for Ukraine sponsorship. I believe that most people are going to be good. I believe that most people are going to live up to those obligations, but who's going to be there when people fail to live up to those obligations? We need to be there for them. We need to be there if somebody gets taken advantage of, or if somebody's living in unsafe housing, and that's going to require money as well.
So I'm going to be really real. Okay, so the Welcome Co-op is great, but what they provide is really minimal. Well, most of what we do is we spend our time augmenting what the Welcome Co-op provides. And my son volunteered or did an internship with the Welcome Co-op over the summer, and the number of beds that he assembled and sofas they assembled and stuff was really impressive. But when I see what families are getting that have just arrived, I'm assuming those things are going somewhere else, because I'm getting pictures and stuff, and we are basically our team. And we're all, some of us are retired, but most of us are employed. I have not moved this much furniture in my life before. And let me tell you, there's plenty of used furniture that is in great condition. Our donors are giving us, we go to houses in Buckhead and get furniture that I really want to keep, if I could. So you might want to loosen up on that a little bit, but you definitely have to have standards. Oh my God, some of the stuff I've picked up, and initially I was a shy person, and I would show up and I wouldn't say, no, I'm not going to take it. And then my husband would say, you got to take it to Goodwill, and Goodwill wouldn't take it. It was that bad. So I totally agree with the with having standards. But folks need to, if I feel like if it was good enough for me to put in my son's apartment, and well, maybe a little better than that, then I would be willing to offer it to, because I don't buy my kids anything new. And there is so much need. And if you want to help in a way where you can see the direct impact, then I would say you really need to reach out to some of the grassroots groups who are, if you make a donation to us, it gets converted into 3 new bicycles within 2 weeks. we have our fingers on the pulse. We are way overextended, and we've learned a lot from the other agencies. But I sit there and I think, if all this is going on at the resettlement agencies, how come the clients I work with who are with those resettlement agencies, how come they don't have diapers? Why am I having to go out to Walmart to buy diapers for them? Or, and we do make partnerships, but the problem is the sheer scope of the issue. I mean, families have a phone number for a caseworker to call. That caseworker has so many clients. I don't know what the proportion is. It's like 4 times the usual, 5 times the usual that they would normally have, that they can't answer the calls. And so they call me or they call one of our volunteers, and I always circle back to the caseworker so they know what's going on, so they're not going out and duplicating that service. But it's really hard out there. So it's a matter of, whatever the agencies get, I think they're distributing it as quickly as they can, but there is still such a gap. And the one thing we haven't talked about is mental health. Every single population we serve has been through such bad trauma. And to my knowledge, I have not yet found a good, reliable source that can provide this in a way that works for the families we work with. Now, I think that is true for all Americans, right? We know this is a big deficit across the country, but I pray that most Americans have not been through the trauma that happened at the Afghan airport. I mean, I have a young woman I was talking to casually after I got to know her, and she said, "Oh, yeah, I fell on top. There was a stampede. She got crushed. And when she got up, she found she had killed a pregnant woman. The woman underneath her was dead. And this is a 23-year-old woman who's here with her father, her mother, and her sister. The 2 sisters are supporting the family. And she's just telling me this. She said it was terrible. And then they lost their mother, and they didn't want to get on a plane with them. I mean, we have families here. Half the family got left behind because they got separated at the airport. The mother is gone. The father and the 12-year-old son are here. The other 4 members of the family didn't make it. How do you get through that? And not act out at school. And we follow 90 families that we've helped so far. And of those, I know of at least 3 young people who have taken overdoses. And I'm sure that's an underestimation. So, we need to get creative and start thinking about ways that we can build capacity in this system for things like mental health in particular. Medicaid doesn't cover that. So that's right.
So I've been told that it's time for us to move into our small group. And I don't have a pitch because I'm not fundraising for the PRC, but what I will tell you is that if you want to make a really big impact, you can sponsor a scholarship for any of these folks to attend our intensive English program. People like to give their time, their money, but our intensive English program at Georgia State is a very rapid way for people to get integrated and go to university. And like Nancy said, a lot of our Afghans, they just want to go to college. They are ready to go. So if that's interesting to you, please let me know.
That's a game changer for a family.
For a life. Language proficiency, you'll notice, is it's the primary social determinant of health that affects every aspect of a refugee's resettlement success in the United States. So thank you all so much. So we're going to tell us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Get back here. So we're going to consolidate in 3 different tables. And then we'll invite each panelist to sit at one of the tables, and we can have smaller conversations for about 10 minutes and rotate. I did not want to interrupt the conversation, so we won't have too many opportunities, but we'll rotate twice. So if we can have this first table to my left and the table behind, and then the table right in the middle, those will be the 3 tables where everybody can consolidate.